Boleh, the podcast. This episode, we're very, very lucky to have author Danny Lim, who's just written the book Wanted Botak Chin. With me on today's interview is Ramesh Sadasivam. Ramesh, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Gopal. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. It will be a very interesting podcast on one of the most colorful characters in the Malaysian history.
Hi, thanks for inviting me on the podcast. Looking forward to the interview.
Great. Well, Danny, thank you so much for spending your time with us. Let's start off with asking about yourself first before we turn to this fascinating subject of your book. So tell us a little bit about your background, where you came from and how you arrived at writing this book.
I'm from Malacca. I have been working as a journalist since '99, freelancing for the last 10 years, working for The Sun and initially then The Edge, and then as freelancing off and on. My most frequent client would be normally fixing for international media, normally BBC. Yeah.
Right. And how did you arrive in journalism?
I was just interning for a local magazine called way back in the late 90s called Men's Review.
I know it well. I used to write for them as well.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Basically, I was it's just an internship for 3 months. Then they decided to offer me a full-time job and just went on from there. Yeah.
Okay. And are you still? Do you still live in Penang or?
Oh, no. I'm Malacca. I'm not. But I'm living in PJ now. Yeah.
In PJ now. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's turn to how you decided to write about this fascinating character, Botak Chin. What drove that decision?
I didn't quite decide it. I got a message from my friend and the publisher of the book, publisher of Buku Fiksi and Matahari Books, Amir Muhammad. He said, I have a strange idea. So the moment he said that, I've known him for a bit. I said, okay, I'm bracing myself. And because he had just published a similar illustrated book called The Malay Tale of the Pig King, which was based on the 18th century story called Hikayat Raja Babi. Mm-hmm. And it was his kind of new way of launching a book where he would first get it crowdfunded, So it's a very smart way of ensuring that the book wouldn't lose money, and then also creating some marketing buzz around it before it was even made. And it was very brief, very, very snappy. It was very colorful, very lively illustrations. And it was also kind of accessible because of the illustrations, accessible to children, but really actually targeted to adults. And he wanted something similar. And with Amir Muhammad, I'm used to his ideas where they always come a bit left field. It's a bit cute. He always straddles that fine line between the obvious and the esoteric. So when he suggested this, I was like, okay, that's interesting. I'm not sure if it works, but I mean, the uncertainty about it makes it fascinating for me. He said he wanted it short, very brief, just over 1,000 words, very snappy. He said he wanted it to be like a Hong Kong crime movie. I think he also asked me because way back, 2000 and 2001, I had written about Botak Chin for magazine and later on newspaper The Sun twice. So I've already done a little bit of research way back then. And I just needed, I guess for me, it was a kind of oddball distraction to get my teeth into while I was deep into my own long-delayed book project.
And why an illustrated version? I mean, Botak Chin is a colorful character, as we all know, but to put it in an illustrated version, I think that's really out in the left field, so to speak.
That is typical of Amir Muhammad. I would it was definitely his decision, and I would say it was because of his kind of a more, I would say, whatever success he achieved with the Malay Tale, the Pig King. I think that he thought, okay, let's try this again for Botak Chin, and I think he has launched a third one called the Jews of Penang, also illustrated, also in the same way.
Could I ask? I'm interested. I mean, I know that the crowdfunders are named in the flyleaf. How long did it take? Just out of interest, how long did it take to raise enough funds to do this?
I'm not sure. I think it was about a month.
That's it.
Roughly a month. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And I also wanted to ask, because what I found reading the book very striking, apart from your very snappy writing, was the illustration, and done by Michelle Lee. And who is she, and how did you guys come to work with her?
Okay, I barely know her, as in like
Right.
I only met her months later when I was interviewed by The Sun, because that time, this was last year. This was last year sometime. The whole project started like September, October last year. This is lockdown period, so everything was done remotely. I basically did the story first, wrote a story first, and then after that coordinated with the illustrations with Michelle. It was everything through email, and I only met her months later. I don't know, sometime in April
Right.
this year. Yeah. So I barely know her. The only thing I know is she works for an animation company. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, but very striking, the illustrations. Yeah. Let's now turn to the subject matter,
Sure.
Botak Chin. And my first question is, how did you begin to research him, and how long did that process take before you put pen to paper?
Okay, firstly, I went about it completely the wrong way. I went about it like just using my journalistic instincts. I did way too much research for something that was really barely over 1,000 words and supposed to be highly simplified. That was Amir's brief. But in a way, I already done my research many years ago when I did that 2 articles about Botak Chin. And luckily I did keep kind of digital notes from that time, way back. We're talking 20 years, 20 years. But then I went about it really the wrong way, where I went too deep. I really went down the rabbit hole of like, okay, I need to find out the original source, because there's I also, of course, now there's Google and all that. I look it up, and then like there's all kinds of things that like, I'm not sure, this is unsubstantiated. I didn't hear of this before. And so I need to find like, okay, what is the actual facts, what it was actually published by at least authoritative sources. And then I found out, oh, wait a minute, I can't find, I remember I went through a lot of articles. I couldn't find any of this. And normally I would keep them. I was so sure I'd keep them. And then I remembered like, this was 1999. Although, yes, I already had a computer and all that, but to do the research required going to the New Straits Times archives. New Straits Times archives, I'm not sure if it is the same right now. They don't allow you to bring any form of device inside. You had to go in and basically with a pen and paper. Unless you want a photostat, and photostat was really expensive, like something like 1 ringgit per page or something like that, which was ridiculous because it's about loads of stuff. And then it dawned on me, oh my God, all those articles are like, I had handwritten all of them down, and obviously they're gone because they're all in that form. But then that's when I also at some point, so this time around, I basically took about a month. It took me for about 2-3 weeks before I realized like, Danny, you're doing too much. You are just doing, I was going crazy. I was like, okay, did he work as a vegetable seller or the fishmonger? Did he really do the Chichong Fun stall? And then of course the thing that drove me crazy was the nickname Botak Chin himself, because actually none of the articles covered. The newspaper archives covered why he was named Botak Chin. And then of course the more recent stuff, the stuff I found on Google much later on Wikipedia and so on, came up with a bit of like stuff that like doesn't sound quite right. I mean, the thing that kind of annoyed me, that bugged me the most was the Hokkien one. Was saying that Botak Chin is Hokkien for jobless Chinese, and I mean, my Hokkien isn't great, but I know enough, just enough to know like that isn't jobless Chinese, and no Hokkien Chinese would call themselves in.
Right.
I actually went down the rabbit hole of actually like asking friends Hokkien, wait, this doesn't sound right? Can you confirm this? And they say, yeah. And then like there's the other one which was a bit more authoritative because it was actual prison warden who said bantu orang tak ada kerja. So that one also okay, fine. If that's what you say, that doesn't sound right then. And I do know actually friends who have relatives or friends of Botak Chin who they obviously didn't want to really talk, but I say like, look, I really got to know this, at least establish this. Is this nonsense or what? And from what it was through a long chain, so it's not a direct contact. The long chain said like, well, it's just what he had short hair as a kid and the nickname stuck. So I kind of went with that, which sounded far more plausible than the other two versions.
And can I ask, one thing that struck me as well about the book, both the illustration and your writing, was that it brought me back to late 60s, 70s Malaysia. The Datsun 120Y Sunny, and did you write it purposely to sort of give us that atmosphere of 60s, late 60s, 70s Malaysia?
Not really. I don't think I have much space, much word count for atmospheric like that. But I did work closely with the illustrator, who is much younger. So obviously her impressions are very much like just from TV and so on.
Sure.
And that's where I like, look. This is where I did my research. Like, okay, somewhere in newspaper archives it said Datsun something like that. Okay, then I actually would search for like the Datsuns of that 1975, 74.
Right.
The police cars of that era would not look like the police cars. I mean, and even right down to the public phone, the kind of public phone is very different. And I remember there were a few things that were like which the illustrator put, which was like because there was a phone number supposedly. Obviously, we don't know what's the phone number, but she had put 8 digits, and I'm like, no, there wasn't 8 digits of phone number back then.
Yeah.
Also, she had this. She originally made Botak Chin with this. I don't know what you call it, but it's very fashionable Lin Dan style of haircut, right? No. Botak Chin wouldn't
back then, the hair covered the ears back then.
Yeah. So there were these things where like, well, yeah. I mean, obviously, she wouldn't know, and yeah. I mean, look, I wouldn't really know, but at least I had amount of research and I had a bit of idea like, okay, this would be the kind of hairstyle, this would be how these elements would look.
Yeah, even the policemen were wearing back then. I think the policemen wore helmets. They didn't wear like soft caps in the cars, and the cars were Alfa Romeo police cars.
Exactly, Alfa Romeo and then also Alfa Romeo, and then because there was the front cover as the shootout with Kula Singham. Kula Singham, being a senior officer, would have a Volvo.
Oh,
yeah.
And talking about DSP Kulai Singham, he's still around. I think he's retired now.
Definitely retired. I'm not sure if he's still around. Actually, I'm not sure. I remember years that all the way back. I did go all the way of calling him up. He kind of did. He didn't want to talk. Yeah, just flat out. Because,
I know. I think
which is a shame.
But the policemen of that era were like that. They were just vaults, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, Ramesh, thank you for betraying your age. Let's now turn to this fascinating subject, Botak Chin. So tell us about where he came from and his youth, and how he grew up into the figure that he was.
Okay. Firstly, I mean, as journalist, I would put a huge caveat here that I'm very much stitching together stuff that is firstly either reported in newspaper archives back then, or mentioned by that famous police chief Yuan Ling. And I also had done 2 interviews with Dr. M. Mahadevan, the chief psychiatrist of Malaysia, who kind of observed and interviewed Botak Chin for 18 days in Tanjung Rambutan. And these are stitched together from that. And I mean, true or not, it's hard to say. So he came from Sentul, boy from Sentul, and Sentul back then is very different from today, very much closer to a, maybe you can say inner city, but very much kampung, actual kampung. Parents, father was a railway worker, mother sold vegetables, I think, and one of 10 children. So came from poor family. Form 3, he left school. To help his mom in the market, and then supposedly he saw how his mom was bullied by authorities, whoever, asking for bribes, and supposedly, and this one mainly came from through the interviews with Mahadevan, who that's what inspired him to like, okay, what's the point of an honest living? Everyone's, even the guy in uniform is a gangster. I might as well be a gangster. But of course, the other views. I think there are some policemen also say like, well, he was just greedy. That he could have. That he was primed for a life of crime anyway. And then he started. Interestingly, he started his crime spree in 1969, April 1969, which is struck me as very fascinating because, like, we all know what happened the month after that. Yeah. So he went on a crime spree just at that time. He was caught on the same year, and then he was jailed supposedly for 12 years, cut down to 7 years, and then actually. With good behavior was let out in 1974. I found recently in letters in Chinese published by, I don't know, one of the Chinese papers, saying where his letters to his brothers, one of his brothers, saying basically being like, okay, I want to go on a straight and narrow, I don't want to be, this kind of life, but. And then this is where the Yuan Ling story come in, that he couldn't last being out, going on the straight and narrow, and basically got a phone number where, like, okay, if in jail he got a phone number and said, okay, anything you call this, and then that's where he supposedly got into gangs, and then he rose up to become quite a major gang leader, broke off on his own to form his own gang, and then his crime spree basically from 1975 to 1976, and then he was arrested. And
right. Well, we'll get into a little bit of specifics of that, but that's thank you so much for that overview.
Yeah.
I'm interested as well in whether you researched gang culture during the 60s, late 60s and 70s in Malaysia.
I would love to. I would have loved to. But this is not that kind of book.
Okay, this wasn't a rabbit hole. You could
not
run
at all.
down.
Even my own research was really like too much already. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
You can see, if you notice, the appendix at the back was my, like, in a way, the publisher's concession to like, okay, because I really wanted to smash in all these details, but it's like, no. Okay, at least give me the appendix.
Yeah.
And in the book, I think you also mentioned that he had a very strict code of conduct within his gang. So that must have come from some research that you did from the gang itself, or was it from Mahadevan's notes?
That was from Mahadevan. But it was kind of also, if I remember correctly, it was also what was mentioned in the newspapers, and usually newspapers, this would have come out in court, where they would have for the defense, he would have testified like for his character, and would say like how like at least look, this guy is not an ordinary criminal. Yeah.
And I'm also interested in the way you write about his effect on society at that time. The impression that he gave was that of a Robin Hood. And of course, now I'm betraying my age, but I remember reading the papers, just prior to his, I was very young, but, during his trial, being told about him. And he was a sort of mythical figure. And your research, and you can tell our listeners, seems to suggest that fairy tale may not quite be true.
Yeah, it's hard. Obviously, it's hard to ascertain, to be absolutely sure. I do know that some policemen have said, I think one of the more famous ones you can cite is Kenny Woodworth, one of the guys who was on the team that was hunting him, said that it was convenient for him to perpetuate that myth, and also it was simply him paying off the locals so that they wouldn't rat on him. That's what the police would say. Mahadevan, so it sounds like Mahadevan is very positive, but obviously Mahadevan can only rely on what Botak Chin tells him. What Botak Chin tells him, it comes from the context of somebody who is trying to avoid a death sentence or something like that. So you must understand the context there. So you could also say that, well, Botak Chin would tell all these nice things to Mahadevan because he's trying to, if not trying to lighten his sentence, at least trying to burnish his reputation, his legacy, and so he told Mahadevan that he was called Robin Hood even as a child, which I don't know if that's what he said to Mahadevan. I would think it was kind of in between, and then of course media comes into play. Media, just like media throughout the ages, is quite happy to play up these kind of angles, because it's always that's the kind of thing that gets viral, that becomes popular, that makes people want to read. That this is not just somebody, common criminal. Wow, it's a Robin Hood, and he's like striking out for the common people. True or not, I would be a bit quite circumspect about that, lah. Yeah.
But there must be some truth to the myth, simply because if I remember reading, he was actually feasted with really good Chinese food from the Chinese, the best Chinese restaurants when he was in Tanjung Rambutan. So I guess he really was a legend with the Chinese community. I mean, for them to serve him.
Then this one gets into trickier territory that actually, to be fair, it was never mentioned of him so much from the ethnic angle, to what extent he was a hero, but you can kind of trace the dots. I mean, without anyone actually saying so. Like, I mean, you think about it. He started his crime spree in April 1969. You can imagine the climate back then, and then this guy comes out in the papers and is, whether true or not, has this myth of a Robin Hood striking out on your behalf. You can see how, whether true or not, you can imagine that people would look up to him and see him as a hero. And also you must remember that, I mean, this is not like now where we have so much media and so much scrutiny. I mean, basically, like back then, your entire, like for us now, we have Facebook, WhatsApp, Google. We have all this media pumping through us every single day. Back then, most people didn't even have TV, and basically, like whatever you read on the front cover of the paper, I mean, that's your main attention, right? And he's on the front cover. He's on the front cover as the Robin Hood.
Amazing. I need to ask you about the policeman who feature in your story. I mean, we know that we have Botak Chin and his crime spree as head of that gang. Obviously, had a sense of discipline over the members of that gang, and went through these this spree of robberies in the 70s. But let's look at it from the police angle for just 1 minute. And we've got two characters, I think, or three police characters who come across in your book. One is Kulasingam, DSP, who was shot by him. The second was the one who actually did the raid, and I think you mentioned his name, Kenny Woodforth. Is that right? And the third, and the third was UN,
Yes.
who met him when he went to Tanjung Rambutan. So, did you speak to any of those? I think you told us you tried Kulasingam, you couldn't, but did you speak to the other two? And what were their impressions of him that don't come across from the book?
I didn't get to speak to them. I'm not even sure if Yuan Ling is alive.
Right. Okay.
So I can't really say much.
But your impressions of them, where do they come from?
Woodworth was interesting. I saw this video conducted by a journalist by Malaysia Gazette. I think they did an interview, and he looks really old and frail. But with Kenny Woodworth, and basically his view is that, well, he's just an ordinary criminal with you can say lucky streak, and like, for example, like his reputation was that he was such a great shot, but they would say like, no, actually he wasn't very good. He came so close to Kulasingam and couldn't even kill Kulasingam. But at the same time, Woodworth didn't think much of Botak Chin. But at the same time, he actually, when Botak Chin went to court, he actually said like, no, don't plead guilty. Let the process, let the legal process take place. Which was interesting. Which is just interesting. Yeah.
And Yuan? And his famous, you write of his famous dinner with Botak, alcohol-fueled dinner with Botak Chin.
Yuan is based on his autobiography. He has a short chapter. It is pretty much that. Yuan Ling really wanted to meet Botak Chin, and I guess because this is the biggest name, and that time he's the great big media celebrity. And I guess for Botak Chin is the same thing. Yuan Ling is legendary. In a way, like I saw one of the questions was also about whether Botak Chin was a communist.
Yeah, tell us about that.
If Yuan Ling, the great fighter against the communists, met him and never once mentions that he has any links to communism or whatsoever, I think I'd go by that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Yuan Ling is a bit more sympathetic. I can sense a bit more sympathetic that this could have been a good boy. He just went down the wrong road, and actually I kind of patched that with Mahadevan's testimony, because this is where it corroborates that Mahadevan did also arrange that meeting and to have it in a cell next to Botak Chin's cell. So it was in Tanjung Rambutan. So they actually had like catering and lots of liquor being brought in, and it was supposedly the three of them, and that's how I know it's 4 hour and they were just drinking like mad. Yeah.
Oh, Tan Sri Mahadevan was at that dinner as well.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So we're going to come to that part, because I find that actually the most fascinating part of the story. But we do know that Botak Chin had encounters with the police. He had a shootout with Kulasingam, and then he was captured in a shootout as well. And do you have any information about how the police found out about where he was and managed to surround him?
It's very, very patchy. So I can only just pick up little bits. I mean, like he had, I think that's why he was actually, I mean, there is mention that he executed 2 of his henchmen, and it's because the police were leaning on these 2 henchmen really, that they were about to rat him out. And also he came after Kulasingham because the police, supposedly the police approached his family, and Botak Chin wasn't very happy about it, that how they approached his family. Okay, so that's why he decided to target Kulasingham. There isn't actual evidence mentioned about how they actually track him, but it was basically, yeah, just enough turncoats or rats or informants, yeah.
Okay. Let's now turn to this really interesting aspect, and it brings us towards the end of his story. So he's captured after this his shootout. His lucky charm is splintered. He's injured but alive. And then tell us a little bit about the time he spent in jail, and what caused his transfer from there to Tanjung Rambutan after that.
Okay, there's actually not much about his time in jail, because it's mostly about, from the newspaper archives, it was about his appearances in court, which were quite sensational. Lots of people would gather every time he would come out, in and out of jail. And it was interesting how, firstly, he pled guilty, which led the judge actually say, like, actually told him in court, and this was reported, okay, in the newspapers, that he was a brave and honest man for pleading guilty, because he was pleading guilty to ISA, Internal Security Act, possession of firearms, that basically mandatory death sentence. Yeah. And
he didn't have a lawyer either. He refused a lawyer.
He refused a lawyer also. And supposedly that, he said, and I'm always amazed, like this is the quote in the newspapers. I'm always amazed how, like, wow, his English is that good, huh? Like, because he would say, like, according to the paper, say, not bravery, my lord, that was foolishness. And
Really?
That was a quote.
That's a quote from the paper. So it's not even like Mahadevan or whatever. Yeah. And then the judge said, like, possibly your career may have been foolish, but today you are a brave man. So there's this weird gap in the thing where suddenly he changes his mind, but there isn't any explanation why he changes his mind. Because suddenly, suddenly he's back in court, appealing the thing. Okay, suddenly he's appealing the thing. This part is obviously, there's absolutely no space for this part in my book. It's not the right book at all. But actually, it is an interesting thing for people interested in the legal aspect of this. Is that he appealed it all the way to federal court. It went to the Privy Council, and the Privy Council actually said, like, it has to go through a retrial because he was tried under emergency regulations, and which was done retrospectively. So it was unconstitutional. Okay, so this was in 1977, and Privy Council. What is interesting then, separate from the Botak Chin news, is that in 1978, that's when appeals to Privy Council were abolished.
Coincidentally.
Was that? Do you think there was a connection?
I don't know. Could be, but this is where, like, really, like, I hit the wall in the sense of, like, I mean, it was a bit getting tougher for me to research this, and I was like, no, Danny, you don't need it for this book. I don't need to go down this rabbit hole. I don't need to.
Sounds like a very interesting rabbit hole to go down, though.
It is, because actually, I think they also changed. This one I remember. They also changed some law, because when he did his second trial, he was charged for the same thing: unlawful possession of firearms under ISA, applied retrospectively.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's
Interesting.
something legal, very interesting there, but where it's like really like, okay, Danny, not in this illustrated book for children,
Yeah.
but less than 1,000
Yeah.
words. Yeah,
I'm going to come back to that at the
yeah.
end of this interview.
Sure.
But let me now ask you about what caused his transfer to Tanjung Rambutan at the time.
So this is where supposedly he grew depressed and all that. I mean, so the flip side to this, you can say, is that he's trying to fake insanity because supposedly he tried to commit suicide twice, drank his urine and so on, and then he was sent to basically to Tanjung Rambutan to be assessed. Is he fit for trial? That's where Mahadevan and in a way Yat Yuen Ling comes in.
Right.
And
And he spent 18 days there, right?
18 days. And actually,
Right.
most of his character, most of the testimonies of his character, I mean, one of your questions was talking about, the lack of information about Botak Chin and all that. And actually, like, if it's not for those 18 days, there'll be very little about his character. It really is the interviews with Mahadevan that, like, really you get a sense of whether it's true or not, we don't know, okay? Whether it's Botak Chin trying to present a certain image to Mahadevan, we don't know. But and also to be fair, Mahadevan can only
One side.
work on what he has, right? So yeah, that's where Mahadevan came out that okay, that this guy is what is it? A self-styled idealist who had grandiose ideas, yeah, Mahadevan watched him. Mahadevan took time to get warm up to him. Because at first, Botak Chin just played cold, just didn't want to lie on him, Mahadevan, and slowly it was through food. Actually, I remember that because then he's like, because he even was refusing the hospital food. Then that's when there was food coming. People were willing to sponsor all this good food from outside. Then that's when Botak Chin kind of warm up to him. Botak Chin would tell him I'm not a communist. See, I stand at attention when Negaraku is playing on TV. All these things, and unbeknown to Botak Chin, Mahadevan actually had CCTV hooked up watching him. Wow. And this is the really, really sad thing is that he said he cannot find the tapes.
Oh, you're kidding me. You can't find that footage.
I know. He has that footage. He has that footage somewhere.
Yeah.
Somewhere, some years now, somebody's going to stumble on this reel.
Yeah.
Because Botak Chin didn't know that he was being recorded yet.
Yeah, he didn't know.
He stood up when the Negaraku was being played, and that's something which is intriguing, so to speak.
It is.
I mean, I'm sad to say. Even now when Negaraku is being played, I don't set up when Negaraku is being played. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But here we have a criminal.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more now about this. I mean, of the 18 days, Mahadevan is observing him, and I mean, you're very lucky to have been able to interview Mahadevan and get all this info. It's given us a lot of color as to his character. But now let's come to that amazing 4-hour meal, and tell us how that came about with Mahadevan, Botak Chin, and Yuen, and what did they speak about in those 4 hours?
Okay, so yeah, again, it's very patchy, even from Mahadevan himself, because again, I interviewed Mahadevan twice. So the first time round was really about Mahadevan himself. So actually the Botak Chin part was just a minor part of the interview. Second time I interviewed him was 2008, and it was more focused on Botak Chin. I can't say that there's a lot of information there because Mahadevan himself by then is quite old and a bit of a sketchy memory. Basically, Yat Yuen Ling wanted to meet him, Botak Chin, first. So he was the police guy who wanted to meet Botak Chin. Botak Chin at first was reluctant, then changed his mind. Then okay, and had to I think Mahadevan had to maneuver a bit because I don't think it was that easy to just allow a dinner for a maximum security inter, you
With
know,
alcohol.
with alcohol and all that. So I'm not sure to what extent those were actually on record or not. So I think he had to maneuver a bit, had to do some things behind the scenes, and it was very much about his life as far as just in general in general terms. Madhavan mentioned that they were talking about Botak Chin's life and Botak Chin's exploits, and I think that's about it, really. I mean,
Right.
there's not much beyond the book. The one I was mentioned, the book. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, can you tell our listeners how Botak Chin from Tanjung Rambutan meets his end?
So according to Madhavan, Botak Chin had actually plans to escape from Tanjung Rambutan. The idea supposedly was that he would get moved to Tanjung Rambutan for this. He would feign insanity, get moved to Tanjung Rambutan, where because it is a mental psychiatric hospital, so it's not a full-on maximum level security prison, right? And so supposedly easier to manage, kind of like engineer an escape with his friends outside. And that's why the police was very, very worried. They had 200 policemen around that area, and there were even concerns that he could somehow, his friends outside could orchestrate a helicopter to pick him up, and then supposedly, according to Madhavan, that his 18 days there as doing the interviews and also watching all the other so-called psychiatric patients there made him change his mind. That and Botak Chin presented an M16 bullet to Madhavan as proof that, look, this is the signal from my friends that they're ready to come in, presumably with guns, and there's going to be a shootout, and a lot of people could get killed. Supposedly, out of the goodness of his heart or whatever, he changed his mind so much over the 18 days that he didn't want this to happen anymore, and he was ready to face justice and send me back to Pudu jail, to basically face certain death sentence. So that he actually said so. So
what we can conclude from that, therefore, is that in his mind, at least, Tanjung Rambutan was a fate worse than death.
Yeah.
Or not quite. It was more like he didn't want the patients there to be in this big shootout.
In the crossfire.
In the crossfire. Yeah.
Right. Oh gosh, that's the sort of, I think, the Robin Hood legend sort of is capped with that, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Ramesh, you're going to say something?
No, I was about to say the same thing as well. I mean, look, the reason behind why, maybe because he was trying to save the inmates from Tanjung Rambutan.
Yeah.
And then
really
he's merry man, so to speak.
He actually confessed that I pretended to be mad in Pudu jail so that I could come here to escape.
Yeah. And of course, following that, he was sentenced to death, and in 1975, was it?
No.
1981.
So this was 1980. The Tanjung Rambutan was 1980. I think he was
81.
1981. Yes.
Yeah, in June, and then he was hung in 1981.
Right.
Danny, that's a fascinating story. My last question to you is this: what is one nugget you have, and because you ran down all these rabbit holes, what's the one nugget you can share with our listeners that Amir did not allow you to put in the book?
Whoa, one nugget. I mean, you would really have been that legal thing. That I mean, obviously, even I wouldn't allow myself to put it in the book like get real,
Okay.
because it will be quite a rabbit hole. But I do think that they actually changed the law
Yeah.
for his purpose. I'm not sure whether it's really specific, but the timing is so quite perfect. It's like
Coincidental. Yeah.
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 Just
Brilliant.
one last question that's really been on my mind, where when you say in your book that he was cremated and he wanted his ashes to be thrown down the drain. Did that really happen? I mean, his ashes just thrown down the drain, and
He wanted to be cremated. Okay. I'm hesitating because I'm not sure if I should say this. Okay. I mean,
Which means you should.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure our listeners would like to know.
He was not cremated, and there is a grave.
Okay.
Okay. So we shan't push that any further.
I think enough said then.
Okay, we shan't push that. We shan't push that any further then.
Yes.
All right, we'll take that offline with you, Danny, in just a minute.
Sure.
Tell our listeners what's the name of the book and where can they buy it?
It's called Wanted, Botak Chin. I think you can buy it on Shopee or even on Matahari Books. Just Google Matahari Books. You should be able to find it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful interview, Danny, and thank you so much for giving us this wonderful book. Congratulations, and we at Boleh wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you.